Mention Dickinson College to a member of Washington from a certain era, and you might just think they took a math class at the small liberal arts school.
If I had taken the months that I was at Dickinson, okay, I would have had a doctorate's degree 10 times over.
Then I played, 12 years with the Redskins times 8 weeks. It's over a year of my life I spent in Carlisle.
Like Sonny Jurgensen, if he was there 10 years for the Redskins, they were there 8 to 10 weeks. He probably in his lifetime as a player spent a year and a half to 2 years of his lifetime in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
I mean, you go back there for 13 years. I put it together one time and I said 13 years, you're there for 5 weeks, and that's more than a year. I spent a year of my life in Carlisle, but I don't put it on my resume,
A lot of math, but no math classes here. Just training camp for 34 years. Training camp in Carlisle, Pennsylvania was made up of grueling, boring days that altogether would be ridiculous, unworthy of, say, listing on a resume. And yet the time spent in this little city in the Cumberland Valley was so important, so special for the individual player, for the team, and for a community. So, let's give it the spotlight. This is Hail Tales, Stories from Washington Football History, Episode 5, The Little College in Pennsylvania. Washington had a training camp routine before Dickinson College, but the team started to realize it was leaving guys tired before the season had even started. Former general manager Charlie Casserly sets the scene.
The stories that I was told to me was that there was a game in the LA Coliseum, and I think it was called the LA Times charity game, but it was a big game. It started preseason, a big crowd there, moneymaker, and that the Washington football team would start their training camp there. The money there would take them all the way back east, and they'd barnstorm and play in different cities. Now, they played 6 games, but eventually they got to the point they were worn out, okay, and realized this wasn't good for the team. So they were looking for a place back east, and these were all stories that were told to me by different people when I was with the team, that they were having trouble. The team had integrated. There were a number of places in the South that weren't ready for that, didn't want it. And whether it was by design or by luck, the president of Dickinson College wrote the team a letter offering their site, Carlisle, Pennsylvania, 2.5+ hours from 2.5 hours from D.C., up in the mountains in Pennsylvania, and that's how they ended up there.
The Dickinson College training camp tradition started in 1963. Hosting the team was no small task for this little school.
My name is Dottie Warner. I'm the Executive Director of Conferences and Special Events at Dickinson College here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and I've worked here at Dickinson since 1976.
Washington was the first summer conference Dickinson had ever had, and the school took it very seriously. Making sure the team was comfortable during their summer visit required a lot of logistical considerations. Take the food, for instance.
They had a separate serving line. Because their food requests were so different from what the other requests of our normal conferees were. And they ate off what we called meat plates, meat platters, not small dishes. Our regular dish size for all the other conference people looked like, a salad plate to them.
Then there were the rooms.
Well, for one thing, they don't fit on a regular college-sized twin bed. So we zip-tied 2 twin beds together and had queen-size mattresses on those beds that we zip-tied together specifically for them. A regular conference towel for the regular summer conference person looked like a hand towel for the Redskins. So we bought special bath towels and washcloths for them, so appropriate to their size. So we had to accommodate that. But it was a lot of detail.
Accommodations carefully put in place. Practice fields essentially in the team's backyard. Everybody's routine concerns or to-dos could, for a few weeks, be put on the shelf. And the focus could just be on
football, football, and football.
Former punter Mike Bragg, who played for Washington from 1968 to 1979.
It was just football. You know, you had 2 practices a day, you had meetings at night, and Coach Allen loved it, of course, because it was like, to him, it was like health camp.
And this period, of course, is not just about sharpening the team physically, but also mentally, as Dexter Manley explains.
Well, I tell you, the mindset going into training camp is war. You go to war with your own teammates.
Adding to that grind was the fact that training camp back in the day was long. Rookies could be there 8 weeks, vets 6 weeks. Plus, there were 6 preseason games. Super Bowl champion Doc Walker puts it bluntly.
It was horrible, miserable, grueling. It's nothing that you'd want anybody you care about to have to endure.
John Jaquia, a rookie for Washington in 1970, wrote about his training camp experience in a diary that has never been shared before. Some excerpts.
Wednesday, July 15th. My roommate said he was dying on the 7-man sled while Tony and I were being tortured on the 2-man sled. The Charlie horses are getting me in my legs. I've taken 10 salt tablets, but every time I move, I feel them. Thursday, July 16th. Practice was hell. Tony and I ran and ran and ran till we thought our guts were coming out. Saturday, August 1st. Seemed like Joe really wanted to go home. We talked a lot about it, and Joe would joke around and say, "I want my mama." At 6'3" and 240 pounds, it was funny to hear him say it, but he may have been serious.
And let's be honest here. This was a different time. Being a pro athlete came with habits that would today make your jaw drop. Players put their bodies through drills that right now would probably be banned. That was the norm. Joe Theismann, for example, remembers the hydration that occurred.
We were a bunch of guys that would have fun. Our offensive linemen would go to a bar and drink after practice. I mean, they'd bring out a case of long necks and they'd throw them down. This was right after, before the meeting and after practice.
There was also the smoking.
I had Mike Bass on my right, defensive back. Pat Fisher on my left. We come in out of practice. First thing those guys do, light up cigarettes. And I'm looking around going, man, Toto, this isn't Kansas. It's a whole different world. This is not the University of Notre Dame.
And whatever else.
Saturday, August 8th. We get taped and dressed. I'm pretty excited. Most of the veterans are taking some kind of pep pill. I don't take any out of fear that I might forget all my keys and calls, etc. I didn't realize these pills were so readily used, but most of the old-timers say that's the only way they can get through the game.
Back in the day, when I began...
George Stark, who played for Washington from 1973 to 1984.
No days off, 7 days a week, Sundays too. So 8 weeks of 2 days, and you hit in the morning and you hit in the afternoon.
Friday, July 17. We did the Lombardi Nutcracker today, and I actually look forward to it. They set 2 bags about a yard apart, and an offensive and defensive lineman crack heads as we, the running backs, try to run through the hole. It wasn't too bad until they put the wide receivers against the linebackers. The linebackers throw a forearm and send the wide receivers flying over the bags, and we proceed to sprint into a brick wall. That wasn't so fun.
Be it the length, the drills, or any number of intense training camp factors, the team, much of the time, was hurting. Dickinson College in the town of Carlisle, whether they knew it or not, helped ease some of those pains.
I remember there was a group of local people there.
Raleigh McKenzie, 2-time Super Bowl champion and a member of Washington from 1985 to 1994.
They always invited, some of the guys over to one of their houses, and they of course, they like the hogs coming over there, and, because we like to eat.
And the ladies in the dining hall, they had their favorite players. And so they would know that, this person liked a certain kind of pie. So they'd always make sure they held a piece of that pie back for them, or they knew this player liked that. So they had their favorites, and they would take care of them. And the other fun thing about the dining hall was they would come from afternoon practice and being super hot. You talked about being hot and humid, and it was. And they would walk into the walk-in cooler in the dining hall to cool down from practice. I'm not sure that meets health and safety regulations anymore, but back in the day, that was something that they did. I'm not sure we could get away with that in this day and age.
Carlisle was something else. It was a town that every year you could count on the stands being full.
Mark Mosley, Super Bowl champion and kicker for Washington from 1974 to 1986.
Now, a lot of Washingtonians would drive up to Carlisle, but the majority of the people in the stands every day at practice were from Carlisle. And they would be there. They would be on the streets. You couldn't go in a restaurant. You couldn't walk. I used to walk back and forth to practice every day. And I would have kids around me the whole way wanting autographs and just wanting to talk. And it was like home. I mean, you felt like that you were at home when you were there in Carlisle. They were just good people.
Carlisle made an impact on the team, and the team certainly made an impact on Carlisle.
It wasn't, it was a different era than it was today, where people would jump all over people with trying to get selfies and signatures.
This is Brian O'Neill. He's from the area and went to Washington's training camp in Carlisle in the 80s.
I think it was more that the team would come in, and it was just neat that they became part of the community.
And I know we had people who would call and ask when would they be here, when would open, because they had open training camp, and then of course they'd close it. So when would open camp be, because they were planning their vacation around it.
In addition to the emotional effect the team had, Washington's presence provided a major financial boost to Carlisle in the summers as well. In the early 2000s, the Washington Post noted, Dickinson professor Bill Bellinger did a study with his students actually focusing on the economic impact of Washington's training camp. They found that the camp circulated more than $4 million in 2003 money through the Carlisle community. Now, it would be interesting to know just how much of that came from the team's visits to one particular establishment.
This Italian restaurant called Rillo's.
Rillo's.
That Rillo's restaurant.
El Rillo's, Italian place. Oh, God.
Did you ever hear about Rillo's Italian restaurant?
You interviewed some of the players. I'm sure they'd remember Rillo's.
You had to go to Rillo's. Outstanding food.
And they even named a couple dishes after the team.
If only those Rillo's walls could talk.
When it was over with pizza, you never realize how good pizza and beer really is until you're exhausted beyond your mind.
I remember Sonny's birthday, Sonny Jurgensen's birthday was, I think it's August the 23rd. For his birthday, they would go to this Italian restaurant called Rillo's, and they'd all come back for the afternoon practice reeking of garlic and red wine, and I'm going like, oh my golly, this is going to be an interesting practice.
Former Washington equipment assistant Tom Heckler heard similar stories.
They used to go, it would probably be Billy Kilmer, Sonny, Myron Patios came from the Rams, Len Hawes, and probably Dyron Talbert, and probably McDowell. They would go there maybe once or twice a week, and they would do, as the people from Rillo's would say, they would do Redskin-style sausage and peppers. And they would eat that, and then they would drink wine and drink beer. The next morning after being out at Rillo's, Coach Allen would not come in any of the huddles because of the garlic and the liquor and the wine. And then all of a sudden, afternoon practice, George was in all the huddles. But that morning, didn't sweat out of their pores yet and everything like that. So Coach Allen didn't do anything in the huddles after the night at Rillo's.
One of my favorite stories involved a guy named Ron McDowell.
Len Shapiro, writer for the Washington Post from 1969 to 2010.
Who was a huge defensive end from University of Nebraska. One day, the 285-pounder, after a second practice in 95-degree heat and tremendous humidity, Ron McDowell weighed in at 265 pounds, 20 pounds below his weight. Sonny Jurgensen, who had retired the previous year, was coming back up to camp to see his old buddies, McDowell being one of them. So McDowell and Sonny Jurgensen and Billy Kilmer and a couple of other guys wound up going to Rillo's to have an Italian dinner and maybe a beer or two, which was allowed, sort of. The next morning, when he weighed back in training camp, after losing 20 pounds the day before, he had put on 22 pounds and weighed 287.
The football all-the-time nature of Dickinson training camp, the isolation and general slower pace of Carlisle, it all led to guys itching for entertainment and catharsis.
But there was a couple. There was a lot of stuff that went on. And
former defensive coordinator Larry Peccatello.
Oh my God, guys playing pranks on themselves in the rooms and things of that nature, and a lot of testosterone there. It's not all let out at practice.
And I remember one night, and we were practicing at night. We didn't practice much at night, but this was a night we were going to practice. So the bus drivers went to get something to eat. We finished practice early. So everybody went to the buses, and we're sitting around waiting. And they said, Joe, take us back to the dorm. I said, okay, fine. So I drove a bus for the first time in my life. I think I took out a street sign up in Carlisle. I'm not sure. But they're very difficult to turn and drive. I have to be honest with you. You have to have a special talent to drive a bus, one of which I did not possess.
This one little deal where some people, they'll go in or whatever, take a nap or whatever between this or between a meeting or practice, whatever. They did this thing where they can penny you in your own room, your room, and you can't get out.
We out there practicing 2 or 3 hours, and Mark's walking around his tight pants and maybe his sunglasses, because he's a kicker. He just kicked before practice, after practice, during practice, and he wasn't sweating. And we out there 100+ degrees, sweating, and I think those guys took up on themselves. Let's tie this guy to a goalpost.
Mo's one of my favorites of all time, man. He is such a great guy. We abused him. He was the subject of more pranks than anybody on the team. Really, my part was like he had a mirror in his locker. And Mo was very detailed. He had all the gels and the hairsprays and all that. So we poured his stuff, always change it and put crap inside of it. And we do all that, not mean things, but putting vinegar in where cologne would be or things like that.
Mosley could give it, too. In 1975, George Allen asked the kicker to room with the team's new defensive tackle, Dave Butts, who had come into training camp out of shape. He wasn't being welcomed by a handful of players, the famous over-the-hill gang, and Coach needed just a little something to get him going.
And I said, you want me, Coach, to room with Dave Butts? I said, I'm just the kicker here. What do you expect me to do? He said, I want you to get him motivated. And I said, you want me, a kicker, to get Dave Butts, this big, huge, giant defensive tackle, to get him motivated? And he said, yeah. He said, I think you can do it too. And so time passed, and our first preseason game that year was against Miami, down in Miami. And I've always been kidded about having my hair perfect and, getting up. And I would always get up every Sunday morning, take a shower, wash my hair, and, do things. And Dave Butts, I knew, hated the cologne that I wore. I used to wear Polo. So that morning I got up and I sprayed Polo all over the bathroom, all over me in the bathroom. And the smell, it was all in the room. And I come walking out of the bathroom, and Dave jumps out of bed, and he starts screaming and hollering at me, Mosley, what in the world? He was cussing me out. He chased me out the room, down the hall. We're both running in our underwear down the hallway, and Dave Butts is chasing me down the hallway. Finally, George Stark comes out of his room and says, what in the heck's going on out here? Grabs a hold of Dave, and I run into the room and close the door. And sure enough, Dave had the best game of his life that day.
Harmless fun that created a more bonded team. Camp at Dickinson College, by design, gave guys more opportunities for time off the field together than any normal scenario.
It was great camaraderie because, when you got a chance, like when I was a rookie, and you got a chance to go up to the Walnut Bottom and you're sitting there having a beer and, you're sitting there with, Hall of Fame quarterback Sonny Jurgensen, and he says, here's what you can do. If you really want to help this team and make this team, this is what you need to do. And so all the rookies, as soon as he said that, it was like, oh, man, okay, I got to do that. But it was your chance to really, sit down and spend time away from the field and, kind of, develop a relationship, a more personal relationship with that person.
You get to know one another. The X's and O's in meeting rooms are fine, but the time you spend away from it as a group together makes a difference. Some of the greatest memories I've had about the game really came off the field. Obviously winning the Super Bowl and all that goes without saying, but the memories that you make away from the field are the ones that stay with you.
There was a love-hate relationship with Carlisle. When that final day of camp would come at the end of August, an intense eagerness to leave sat closely with a deep appreciation for the time spent.
I'm going to close now. My Carlisle training camp is over. I know I'll forget all the pain and the mental torture I've gone through these past 6 weeks. In fact, I've forgotten a lot of it already. I'll be ready to go through it again next year if given the chance.
Washington's annual tradition of going to Carlisle for camp ended in 1994.
Jack Kent Cooke made a deal with the state of Maryland to build a stadium in Maryland. Part of the deal was we had to move the training camp out of Pennsylvania and into Maryland, and that's how we ended up at Frostburg.
Though the team came back briefly in 2001 and 2002, it didn't stick. The 34-season stint at Dickinson College is the longest period at one site in Washington's camp history.
It is part of the tradition. Anytime you do something for that long of a period, you got to carve out somewhere a chapter about the team being there. And you had legends there. Lombardi was there for a year. Obviously, George Allen was there for all his period of time. Joe Gibbs was there, and for his period of time. So I think that just the fact that and all the great players that came through there. To me, it's a chapter, and there's a story to be told there.
To laugh together, to cry together, to spend time together, to go out to dinner together, to talk about everything together. Families, friends, business, football, all of it just makes, I think, for a very strong football team.
So you can't fill those voids when the team is over, when your days are done, when it's dispersed, they're gone. You can't put that together. That's why when you contacted me talking about Carlisle, I went, oh yeah, because that's a happy time.
This episode was narrated, produced, and researched by me, Hannah Lichtenstein, senior copywriter for the Washington Commanders. It was produced and edited by Jason Johnson. Executive producers are Ray Alentine, Ryan Yoakum, and Kevin Klein. Graphics designed by Roman Schumann and Rakim Smith. Social media by Maggie Anchulis and Rebecca Solzbach. Alumni relations help comes from Tim Hightower and Caroline Decio. Thank you to all of our guests for their contributions, and thank you for listening. Have a favorite franchise moment you think should be featured on Hail Tales? Let us know, and we just might cover it in our next season.